Hello, it's Concord Wind. If you watched my last video, you know that um, the night before tonight, I guess I don't know. Is it morning or is it night? I don't know. Um, the night of, I think, October 26th, which I guess that would be tonight. I guess October 25th. I took 600 milligrams of Benadryl, which was so stupid. But I was just trying to go to sleep, and taking one at a time wasn't doing it, so I started taking four at a time until I was out trying to go to sleep so I could be up today or yesterday or whatever. And so I'm still kind of out of it. I've had to redo this video once. This is the second time I've recorded this video because the first time I was barely able to talk. But I want to talk about this video by Rhett McLaughlin, Am I Afraid of Hell? He basically talks about how he stopped believing in God because of the cultural influence over the development of the Bible. For example, he's talking about hell, and he was talking about the descriptions of hell would evolve with the changing of the surrounding culture, and the surrounding cultures at the time had similar stories or depictions of hell as what was written in the Old Testament. And I just want to say, because you might be faced with a challenge from this angle from people who don't believe in God, and you need to know how to respond. So the response that you should give is that God holds sovereignty over everything, okay? He dominates and controls the entire universe. So the revelations that were received by the authors of the Old Testament seeming to have influence over the surrounding cultures and the developing cultures, that that's just because God is in control of the development of those cultures. So that's why there's consistent views held, consistent descriptions of hell and stuff, and there's these consistencies, and when you compare the cultures in the Old Testament and stuff, you find these consistencies because God is in control of everything. And some people might ask, well, if God's in control of everything, why weren't these views more widespread? Why weren't these depictions of hell more widespread? Why did it seem to be centralized in the Middle East in a single location? And the answer is that in the Old Testament age and in the New Testament age, and just the Bible in general, was written based off of God's work in Israel. And that was the stage, that was the center stage of his work, was Israel. Now it's China. China is now the center stage for his work, but it was Israel. And that's why countries closer to China seem to have more believers in Almighty God, because there's more of an influence. And God created this world, he created this mankind. Moreover, he was the architect of ancient Greek culture and human civilization. So those are God's words. He was the architect of ancient Greek culture and human civilization. So that's not the only culture. I mean, all of human civilization is in his hands, and he controls, just like the fact that there are people that enter into this world that have a huge influence, like Confucius had a huge influence over Chinese culture. And even though he was an evil, wicked person, he was still a special person because of the range of his influence. He was able to influence the entirety of China. And God knew that he had that kind of influence, that he would have that kind of influence. And so people like Confucius are only born like once every 70 or 700 or 7,000 years. Like they're only born every once in a while, whereas like normal ordinary people are like have are more needed. There's more of a necessity for normal ordinary people than there are for special people. So that's why there's so many normal ordinary people in the world, and they're born all the time. But special people aren't born as much because there's not as much of a necessity for special people in the world. And that's how God controls and shapes cultures. Even cultures, and all cultures have negative elements because Satan has an influence over the way cultures develop too. But God is in control of everything, and he dominates Satan, and Satan can do nothing without God's permission. So ultimately, it's this chess game where God has all the pieces exactly where he wants them. And whether things, there be good things or bad things, all things are under God's control. And he determines where good things are. He determines where bad things are. He has such a powerful influence over this universe and over this planet. And Satan's influence is only there by God's permission. If God ordered Satan to stand down, it would have to stand down, and it would no longer have any influential power. So God holds sovereignty over everything, and everything is arranged the way it should be. And then there's the matter of free will. Humans have some free will, but we don't have much free will because Um, God controls our lives, and He controls what jobs we're able to keep and what jobs we're not able to keep. He controls who we're able to stay married to for the rest of our life and who we're not able to stay married to. He controls how many children we have, who we have children with. Maybe. Maybe he controls that part too. I don't know. His words don't specify. Um, you know, he controls the cultures. And even if he controls the cultures through Satan and through evil people, it's still God being in control. And even if the cultures and things don't go along with his will, they're there for a reason because of his great wisdom. You know, like for example, the fact that God used culture to influence China to celebrate, uh, dragons, and for the country of China to be represented by a dragon, and the book of Revelation talking about the great red dragon. And usually the dragons depicted in China are red, usually, you know? And that's Satan exposing itself. That's an example of God's wisdom where God will use something evil for his purpose so that his plan may be carried out more swiftly. And we can all see that China is the country of the great red dragon as prophesied in the book of Revelation. We can all see that. But we can only see that because God gave Satan permission to develop Chinese culture in such a way that it would revere the red dragon, and the red dragon would be a part of Chinese culture. So China would be represented by the red dragon. So it would make it easy to spot where the great red dragon lies coiled. And it's China, and we all know that. And we know that because of God's meticulous arrangements. So there's always wisdom at play in everything God arranges. So we have to view the world through the lens of God's words to understand it. You know. All right. Um, that's it. God bless and goodbye.